Between stocks and bonds. Very good. Diane, you raised your hand. What is this financial planners? What should we know about them in helpfulness? How do we know a good one from a bad one? Or an effective one from one who's not quite so effective? Any idea?
Yeah, it helps. They help with putting your investments into something that will grow.
Investments into something that will grow. That's good. So a financial planner, from what we've heard today in the different services, are supposed to help people to manage their money, to plan what to do with it, hopefully to make it grow. I think one of the things we heard in the first service from one of our folks was a financial planner also helps us to know not to engage it emotionally. Don't get emotional about your investments. Now I said to him, and I said in the first service, well, that's nice advice, but a few weeks ago when my statements came in the mail, it didn't help. I was very emotional when I saw those declining numbers. And someone else said, well, the financial planner will help you to buy low and sell high. I said, I got nothing left to buy with. So let's flip it now. What about the investor, a shrewd and effective investor? What's this thing about investing? Who can help us with some of that? A good investor. Wally, start us off. A good investor.
Saying that if the investor is very busy, that's how he gets done.
If the investor's but if they're busy, Wally, they're not watching my money. No, but it's a good sign of the investor. A lot of people trust him. Okay, others. A good investor. But apparently none of you are investing anything. No. Terry.
A good investor will put their money away first before everything else comes along to take away from that.
A good investor carves a bit off the top first to be invested. I'm getting that's what you're saying. Very good, Terry. Anything else? A good investor?
Research.
Research. Researching to
Companies you're going to invest in.
researching the companies you're going to invest in. So all of you who have invested in the sand pit that isn't doing anything, research, Jack says, will help us with that.
I didn't do a good job.
Jack says you did a good job. Well, part of the reason we're talking about this stuff, investing, investors, financial planners, stewardship, is because we're beginning our stewardship campaign, but we're really, in March of this year, when our stewardship committee started looking at a campaign, our stewardship committee actually said, we better start with a campaign that is sensitive to difficult economic times. In March, our stewardship committee said, we might be in a recession by the time this thing gets kicked off. We better be sensitive to that, and we better understand stewardship as a part of discipleship. If we understand discipleship, then we understand how stewardship flows out of that. In order to understand some of what Jesus is saying to us here in Matthew chapter 7, it helps to know that Jesus isn't just jumping into these words about money in chapter 7. Jesus actually says more about money in the Bible than any other subject. And Jesus starts beginning to teach, especially in chapter 6 with the Sermon on the Mount, where he begins to say, blessed are. And Jesus carries these various teachings on the kingdom of God, the nature of discipleship, on the expectations of disciples. Jesus starts that with the Sermon on the Mount, carries it right on through chapter 6, carries it on through chapter 7. So where we stepped into in chapter 7 is a part of an understanding of discipleship. What we've stepped into are some words that Jesus pulls from the pillars of Judaism. And when I say the pillars of Judaism, I mean the understandings from the Old Testament. Now, yes, there are some Christians who want to take issue with the Jewish faith. But you better remember that Jesus never repudiated or disclaimed the Jewish faith. Jesus was a Jew, and some of what he taught retained the understandings of the Old Testament. And in retaining the understandings of the Old Testament, he pulled on the pillars of Judaism, and these are some. Some of those pillars that Jesus wanted folks to understand and to retain. Deeds of loving kindness. That's a pillar of Judaism. Deeds of loving kindness. That if you're a person of faith, you continue to engage in deeds of loving kindness. acts of mercy. And Jesus laid out these things as a foundation for the Christian faith. He pulled from Judaism, but he laid it out that a good person who was his disciple should continue to engage in deeds of loving kindness, continue to engage in acts of mercy, and to trust and serve God. Trust and serve God. Now, let me put that in context for you. If the only time that you have understand or connect to a trust in God is when you look at your money, if the only thing about you is your money that says in God we trust, then you're probably missing some aspects of discipleship. If your money is the only place and only connection you have to in God we trust, you're missing the pillar of Judaism, which moved into the Christian faith in trusting and serving God in all that we are, in trusting God. A part of that pillar and a part of that faith and a part of that Old Testament wisdom also from the Proverbs. This message, ask and it will be given, seek and you will find, knock and the door will be open, connects also with the Old Testament proverb wisdoms. And so Jesus isn't just making up some new stuff here. He's continuing with a faith and a foundation. But what he's doing is he's saying for discipleship, for Christian discipleship, this is a part of the faith. Asking God, seeking God, knocking. Now the other part that's really important on this discipleship that Jesus is laying out is that it becomes not just a part of what we ask and how persistent we are. Persistently asking, seeking, knocking, it becomes a part of understanding God's divine goodness. That's the basis of this. The basis of the understanding of the Christian faith. God's divine goodness. And because God is divinely good, we ask God, we seek God, we knock, we search. As a part of God's divine goodness, we engage God. Now, let me say it differently. You can ask God for all things, anything you want. I believe that this word is in some ways plain and true. Ask God. Because I believe God is smart enough and wise enough to figure out what you're going to get. God is smart enough and wise enough to discern of your asking, of your seeking, of your knocking, what you will find and what you need. And God's loving kindness and God's goodness, and in the pillar of the foundation of discipleship, God will be your lead and Christ will be your guide. And so this expression and this encouragement to ask, to seek, to knock. And when I see these words, knock and the door will be open, it really kind of brings back to memory probably the first time I had a sense in a church context of knocking. Because to me, I hear this word knock, and it recalls and brings to mind kind of being locked out, shut out, or refused entry. You see, occasions when I think about this word and hearing it, and how I understood it, you remember me telling you that my mother had a pretty simple rule. I didn't have to go home to the Baptist church on Sunday, but I had to go somewhere. And so in my searching of congregations and searching of faith of my own, I visited and participated in worship in different faith communities. I heard this word, ask and seek and knock, and I was seeking and I was asking. I was saying to God, okay, God, I got to go to church somewhere. Mom says so. And so I was knocking. One of the places I landed for a short time was a Catholic community. And I was delighted to be there.